I'm Matt McClure, and this is Currents. Defending traditional values. Catholic leaders in Brooklyn and Queens come together to learn how and why.
From a day like this, what you hope to do for the lay leaders and for anybody else who is there is to just strengthen in them a resolve to be faithful to the message.
Plus, Pope Benedict appoints a Queens native to lead the Catholic Church in New Hampshire. And get your green on. It's time once again for the Great Irish Fair.
Many of our parishes, if you take a look at them in Brooklyn and Queens, they were built by the Irish immigrants. And so they really laid the cornerstone and literally built our churches.
Well, good evening. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. Are traditional values under attack here in New York? Well, pro-life activists and opponents of same-sex marriage may be thinking exactly that after two pieces of controversial legislation passed this year. First, there was Bill 371, which New York City Council overwhelmingly approved back in March. That legislation requires pro-life pregnancy centers to advertise that they do not offer abortion referrals or artificial contraception. That law, though, is currently on hold as its opponents challenge its constitutionality. Flash ahead to June, when the New York State Senate voted to legalize same-sex marriage as the clock ticked down on the legislative session. That measure was quickly signed into law by Governor Cuomo and took effect in July. The question then for opponents of these measures might be, the question that they're asking themselves could be anyway, how can we stand up for what we believe? Well, the Diocese of Brooklyn's Joint Parish Respect Life Committee held a program yesterday in Douglaston, Queens to get some answers.
Thanks for coming on such a beautiful day today. This is the first of a series of 3 programs. The call of our times, to uphold and defend life and family traditional values.
And my focus primarily is on public policy. What I'd like to do with you is to essentially go back to some basic principles and some core ideas on how we as Catholics can influence these areas, public policy, legislation, and even elections. From a day like this, what you hope to do for the lay leaders and for anybody else who is there is to just strengthen in them a resolve to be faithful to the message.
Well, I think knowledge is the strongest thing because a lot of people just don't see what's going on. You know, right now, Catholic values are just going down and we're getting attacked and we have to fight back, so to speak.
How many people are aware of the fact that most abortionists are not trained in OBGYN? They're washouts from every branch of medicine. Why don't we put in counter legislation that says if you're going to be an abortionist, you have to be a board-certified OBGYN in good standing?
We also need to get representatives in our local colleges, okay, so that we can come and speak and address these issues. Because what they spoke to us about is such a beautiful issue about the sanctity of life. Our young people don't hear this anymore. And who, if we can't speak to them about it, who is going to?
Let's take a look at test tube babies and in vitro fertilization. When you look at IVF, you begin to realize that the husband and the wife are no longer the co-creators with God. We get their gametes, and now they're relegated to the sidelines in a laboratory, and the act of creation is performed by laboratory technicians.
It's been a 50-year drift into the culture of death, so this isn't going to happen overnight. But we have to start walking this back. We have to draw the line, and then we have to begin the pushback. I don't think you can take a look at same-sex marriage and pull it apart from abortion. I don't think you can pull it apart from euthanasia or physician-assisted suicide. I don't think that ultimately you can do this because we're talking about an organic unity in the freedom of the individual.
All of the other politicians, because you have...
Well, I think that the election result in Queens in the special election for Congress was a positive sign. The thing I think that was positive about it was that one of our most important issues, the definition of marriage, was a factor in that election. And Mr. Weprin, who voted in favor of the redefinition of marriage, was held accountable by some of his constituents.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us.
And I think it's important for people to remember that the truth is on our side, that God is on our side, and that there's a lot of reason to be optimistic, even with all of the negative things that are going on.
Yes. Amen.
Well, there's more currents ahead. When we return, President Obama's plan to reduce the deficit. We'll have that story and the rest of the day's headlines next. Welcome back to Currents. I'm Matt McClure. Coming up later, Coney Island was awash in green this past weekend for an event that is a Brooklyn institution. We'll have that, but first, we'll have a look at today's headlines. Well, green was also the topic of the day in Washington, more specifically money, as President Obama outlined his $3 trillion plan to reduce the deficit. The president's plan includes $1.5 trillion in new revenue, which would come largely from higher taxes on the wealthiest Americans.
We shouldn't balance the budget on the backs of the poor and the middle class. That for us to solve this problem, everybody, including the wealthiest Americans and biggest corporations, have to pay their fair share.
House Speaker John Boehner criticized the president's plan, accusing Obama of pitting one group of Americans against another. Well, meanwhile, Boehner will have another battle on his hands next year. A Tea Party activist says he will challenge the speaker in the 2012 primaries. The Cincinnati Enquirer reports that David Lewis will mount a campaign on just a single issue: Boehner's support of a federal budget that includes funding for Planned Parenthood. Now, Boehner did face two candidates in last year's primary and took 85% of the vote. Closer to home, New York Attorney General Eric Schneiderman is trying to get a judge to drop a lawsuit filed by opponents of the state's same-sex marriage law. In that suit that was filed by New Yorkers for Constitutional Freedoms and 3 other plaintiffs, it challenges the legality of the process used to approve same-sex marriage in New York State. Schneiderman filed papers in state court Friday asking that the suit be tossed out. The plaintiffs, meanwhile, say they look forward to their day in court. Well, just a week after the opening of 9/11 Memorial and Museum at Ground Zero, there is another much talked about opening taking place in Lower Manhattan. It is the first part of the controversial Park 51 Islamic Center near Ground Zero. The center will open with an art exhibit that features photos of children from 169 countries who now live in New York City. News of the Islamic Center sparked fierce protests last year from people both for and against the center's location just blocks away from Ground Zero. In other local news, a Queens native is headed north. Pope Benedict has appointed Rockville Center Auxiliary Bishop Peter Labashi as the new bishop for the Diocese of Manchester, New Hampshire. I'll speak with Bishop Labashi about that appointment just a bit later in the show. Meanwhile, Catholic high school students in Philadelphia are heading back to the classroom as teachers voted to approve a new contract and end a strike. Details of the new contract have not yet been released, but schools are set to reopen on Tuesday. Boston Archbishop Cardinal Sean O'Malley, meantime, urging Catholics in Boston's legal community to oppose a ballot initiative that would legalize assisted suicide. Speaking at a mass for Massachusetts judges, lawyers, and other legal professionals, O'Malley said, quote, "We are called upon to defend the gospel of life." The measure in question would allow terminally ill patients to take a lethal dose of a prescription drug to end his or her life. Massachusetts voters will decide that issue in the November 2012 election. Well, meanwhile, the daughter of late Massachusetts Senator Ted Kennedy will be laid to rest later this week. Paul Burton has that story.
Shock and total sadness. Her daughter Grace was my page in the Senate last summer. Saw her a number of times this summer.
Kara Kennedy was the oldest child of the late Senator Ted Kennedy. She died of a heart attack at a D.C. health club on Friday.
She was at the health club. She had worked out. She was in post-workout, and she was found lying there on the floor, and her heart just gave out.
At the Basilica of Our Lady of Perpetual Help, thoughts and prayers went out to the entire Kennedy family.
Sad. Yeah, really sad.
We know that the church has been certainly a place of faith and an anchor of hope for the Kennedy family. We want to extend our heartfelt thoughts and prayers and sympathies to them.
Kara had previously survived a near fatal bout with lung cancer and had been in remission. This church here, Our Lady of Perpetual Help, is where the late Ted Kennedy came to pray for his daughter.
And Teddy, in his characteristic way, just wouldn't accept it, and they searched around and found a way to have surgery, and it gave her new life until this tragedy.
At the Kennedy Library, visitors were also surprised to hear the news.
And I was absolutely astounded to think that once again something tragic has happened to that family.
Totally dedicated to her children, shy, but I just remember the sparkle in her eyes and the smile, and it's just very, very sad.
That report from Paul Burton. Kara Kennedy's funeral will take place at Holy Trinity Church, where her father worshiped and where former Meet the Press host Tim Russert's funeral was held. Well, Cardinal Theodore McCarrick was set to return to Washington today after traveling to Iran in an effort to free the jailed U.S. hikers. McCarrick was part of a delegation of 3 Christian and 3 Muslim leaders who met with Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. The hikers, Shane Bauer and Josh Fatal, were arrested, along with Bauer's fiancée, Sarah Shroud, in 2009 while hiking near the unmarked Iran-Iraq border. They were found guilty last year of spying and illegal entry into Iran, and they were sentenced to 8 years behind bars. Shroud was set free last year for health reasons. The men were expected to be released this week, but that's been delayed because the judge is on vacation. Well, parishioners at a Florida church managed to subdue a gunman who opened fire and shot 2 pastors on Sunday. Holly Gregory has that story.
A house of worship becomes a house of terror.
On Sunday morning, where you're supposed to be going to worship, and you can't go at church and worship because the devil is in the church now.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. I can't even fathom it. I don't know what's going on with the world.
It all started at this home a block away from the church. Police say 57-year-old Jeremiah Fogel shot and killed his wife, 56-year-old Teresa Fogel. Her family devastated.
She's always tried to be everybody's friend. She would do anything for anybody. She did not deserve this.
Investigators say Fogel killed his wife, then walked into the Greater Faith Christian Church and shot the pastor, William Boss, and the associate pastor, Carl Stewart. Congregation members wrestled the gunman to the ground. Longtime friends of Reverend Boss say he was well respected and loved in this community, and he started the Christian school next door.
He tries his best to do everything he can for everybody.
The families of the victims now left to deal with a stunning blow to their faith.
I know everything happens for a reason. God is too wise to make a mistake.
That report from Holly Gregory. And from Europe, voters in the predominantly Catholic principality of Liechtenstein have rejected a measure that would have legalized abortion there. Under current law in Liechtenstein, terminating a pregnancy carries a penalty of a year in jail, even if it's done in another country. Close to 80% of Liechtenstein is Catholic. Stay with us, there is more Currents ahead. Coming up, from Long Island to New Hampshire, a Queens native gets the call to lead the Diocese of Manchester. Welcome back. Well, Pope Benedict has named Rockville Center Auxiliary Bishop Peter Labashi as the new bishop for the Diocese of Manchester, New Hampshire. In a statement, Rockville Center Bishop William Murphy said he will miss Bishop Labashi's wise counsel and tireless apostolic spirit. And although Bishop Labashi was a priest and bishop for our Long Island neighbors, he's a native of the Diocese of Brooklyn. Born in Jackson Heights, Queens, he attended St. Margaret's School in Middle Village and Cathedral Prep in Elmhurst, also St. John's University as well. And now he's heading north to New Hampshire. Well, today he is in the place he'll be calling home, the Diocese of Manchester. And now he joins me by phone. Bishop, thanks so much for being part of Currents today. We really appreciate your time.
I'm very happy to speak with you. Thanks so much for getting in touch with me this day.
No problem at all, sir, and congratulations, first of all. Just wanted to say and ask you here as we start off, how did you first hear about the appointment to Manchester, and what was your reaction?
Well, I had gotten a telephone call, a message from the Charge d'Affaires, Monsignor Lanthom, and so I returned his call, and in just a few brief words, he said, the Holy Father has appointed you to be Bishop of Manchester. And it did come like a thunderbolt because I was not expecting such a thing. Wow. And I'm very, very humbled by it and grateful, but it was quite a surprise.
Well, I can imagine. And this is one of those things where, you know, the boss says go and you say yes, sir, and you just kind of get up and go. And I understand you are there in Manchester today.
Yes, in fact, we're on our way to visit another community. We're going to see the Sisters of the Most Precious Blood. We've been to a high school. We've been to the local food bank. And, of course, we met with some of the people earlier this morning. And we have a few more stops that we're going to make to be introduced and to begin to meet some of these wonderful people up here. This is the church up here in New Hampshire, and it's really a grace and a gift to be here.
Wonderful. Well, how are you finding things so far in New Hampshire to be different than in New York? What sort of different challenges might you face there in ministering than here in New York?
Well, I think the only thing at this point that I could say is, you know, having grown up in New York and, you know, Brooklyn, Queens, and Long Island, I was so familiar. Actually, I really need to learn and to listen and to spend time here now to begin to know what the culture and the way the church has lived here, the way our faith has continued to be handed on here. So my biggest challenge right now will be simply to learn, to listen, to be open, and to pray together with our people so that I can come to know a little bit more what the future will be.
Great. Well, tell us a little bit more about, we kind of touched on it here just very briefly, but tell us a little bit more about your local ties to the Diocese of Brooklyn. You're originally from Queens, correct?
That's correct. Grew up in Middle Village, and we lived only about 2.5 blocks away from St. Margaret's Church. And we still have many people buried in St. John's Cemetery right across the street from St. Margaret's. And the pastors have been so very kind, and particularly Monsignor Stephen Aguja has been very, very kind and welcoming throughout these past years. And so I'm eager to see him again and to thank him. And then Cathedral Prep, Elmhurst, the Prep Seminary, I had already some time ago agreed to go and celebrate Mass there. I think it's on October 5th or 6th for the student body. And now I guess there'll be some more news to talk about when I get there.
Absolutely. Tell me a little bit as well about how your early formation here in the Diocese of Brooklyn kind of has helped shape you and continues to do so as you move on to a new diocese in Manchester.
Well, I tell you, even from childhood, our parish was a very strong one. We used to have so many opportunities for prayer. Certainly, we celebrated Mass every single day, 8:15 Mass before school. Every First Friday, we would have First Friday devotions at the end of school. And so all through elementary school, it was a wonderful, good parish with a strong foundation. What we learned in our school from the Sisters of St. Dominic of Amityville, we really had such a good formation. And then going on to high school at Cathedral Prep, certainly the formation there was geared toward, in the very beginning, very much a seminary style of formation. Then it went more to a college preparatory formation. And on my last visits back there, I see it is so powerfully and strongly what I remember from the very beginning. A good formation and preparation for priesthood, spiritual direction, prayer, involvement in charitable work and Catholic action. So from earliest childhood, a strong faith, strong parish community, and strong elementary and high school education were very, very, very much part of my vocation, and please God, the grace that we receive now.
All right. Well, Bishop Labashi, thank you so much for taking some time out for us. Of course, that our thoughts and our prayers go with you as you now sort of make the journey to New Hampshire. And we look forward to getting to talk to you at some point again in the future. We really appreciate your time today.
Thank you. And my very, very best to Bishop DiMarzio and to the associate, the auxiliary bishops there. And a great, great thank you to the Diocese of Brooklyn. And God's blessing always, 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 always in my prayers.
Thank you so much, Bishop. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
God bless you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. And stay with us. There is much more Currents ahead. When we return, shamrocks, bagpipes, and a whole lot of fun go hand in hand at the annual Great Irish Fair.
And over the course of its history, all the proceeds have been donated to various charities, including Brooklyn Queens Catholic Charities and now the Brooklyn Queens Diocesan Schools.
Well, finally tonight, if you were in Coney Island this past weekend, you could probably be excused for thinking it was St. Patrick's Day. Yes, your calendar is not wrong. We do have 6 months to go before that. But there was a celebration with plenty of Irish culture and plenty of green. It was the 30th annual Great Irish Fair. And the fair had two purposes. One, of course, was to celebrate the Irish culture, but the other was to benefit Catholic schools of Brooklyn and Queens. We headed out to MCU Park to check it out.
We gather here, as we've done for the past 30 years, on the fairgrounds of Coney Island to celebrate Irish culture, to celebrate our Irish Catholic faith, to come together as a community, enjoy one another's company, and enjoy whoever else wants to participate.
Well, it's actually great to celebrate the Irish. You know, many of our parishes, if you take a look at them in Brooklyn and Queens, they were built by the Irish immigrants. And so they really laid the cornerstone and literally built our churches. And so it's great to celebrate them and all that they've contributed.
The Calling Queen is like, you represent basically everything that's going on today at the fair, especially Irish culture, and really just be a role model to people. Oh, I was shocked to find out that I was the Calling Queen. But when I found out, of course, I was thrilled and happy to be chosen to represent.
It was started 30 years ago right here in Coney Island by some dedicated folks, volunteers, and over the course of its history, all the proceeds have been donated to various charities, including Brooklyn Queens Catholic Charities and now the Brooklyn Queens Diocesan Schools.
Many of the scholarships that we are a part of go to minority children, the children and families that are in such great need today. And we feel it's our rightful place to provide those scholarships where many of our people before us benefited.
Well, it's important to keep our schools open. As you know, as the enrollment declines, we need more and more children to stay in our schools and not leave our schools, because then the costs go up and then the school is in jeopardy of closing.
The qualities of the people that we honored are obviously leaders in our community, people that are dedicated and committed to service. You see that in the civil servants in the fire department, the police department. Many years we've had honorees from education, primarily Catholic education.
To receive the award today was a great honor. I've actually been attending this fair for many years, at least 15 years I've been coming here, and Timmy Stackpole, the Memorial Award, whose award I received, was a good friend of mine, and he perished on 9/11, and to receive an award with his name on it was a fantastic honor for me.
I was dumbfounded. I was like, I got the award in memory of Father Michael Judge, a Franciscan who was killed in 9/11 and the buildings came down. And I just thought of Michael Judge. I said, I can't hold his sandals that he would wear. And who am I to be honored with an award in his name? It was very humbling, extremely humbling.
The Irish tradition continues. It will continue for decades and generations to come. We'd also like them to enjoy the music that we provide, the dancing, the entertainment, the rides for the kids, the food. It really is a great time, and it's very much a family-friendly event. We pride ourselves on that. We all have young children, and we're happy to bring them down each year and to allow them to experience it for themselves.
Well, it's always a great time when you can celebrate Irish culture, and even better when you can do it for a great cause like the schools in Brooklyn and Queens, the Catholic schools here in the diocese. Well, that is it for this particular edition of Currents. Now, coming up on tomorrow's show, the military's Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy officially gets repealed. We'll talk with the Archbishop for the Military Services to get his thoughts. Until then, though, be sure to visit us online over at currentsny.net, and we're also on Facebook and on Twitter. But don't go anywhere just yet. We've got plenty of great programming straight ahead here on the net. Coming up tonight at 9 o'clock, a brand new season of Too Blessed to Be Stressed. Tune in as David Bissono, Jahaira Rodriguez, and their studio guests impart words of wisdom and share lessons in faith. It's an all-new season of Too Blessed to Be Stressed beginning tonight at 9 right here on Net. Well, for all of us here at Currents, I'm Matt McClure. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great night.